Hello and welcome back to another episode of Wuhan Weekly, a podcast that follows the trials and tribulations of 4 Scottish teachers in China. With me today are Ruth Taylor.
Hello.
Tony Ingalls.
Hi.
And Dean McKinnon-Thompson.
Hello.
So we have just arrived back from our holidays and we've had a couple of weeks at school. So we're going to spend the rest of the podcast talking about that and what the Spring Festival is like in China. But before we do that, we're going to introduce a new segment about some obscure news articles in China. Now, I know some of you who read the news back home will see some of the more popular or the bigger news stories, but we want to try and show you some things that you might not hear about. Okay, so there's been a news article recently which has scared some of the foreign teachers here because they're not very good with elevators. They have found, just after the Spring Festival, I think it was, a woman who had been locked in an elevator for 30 days, was it? And this was during the Spring Festival period, so I think they said it was the 30th of January.
Right.
That she was locked. The 30th of January, is that right?
I don't know exactly, but it sounds like it happened, it was Spring Festival that basically caused this lapse in judgment. So
basically, her foosty body was rotting in an elevator. That's terrible, I can't say that.
You can't.
Can I say that?
You can't, she's dead.
Go again.
Dean!
Oh, she is.
Maybe just explain it first
Yeah.
before you talk about foosty.
Yeah.
So what actually happened? Why was she trapped in this elevator for so long?
The construction workers shut off the power to her building, and then I think they must have left. I don't really know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me why you would be in a lift for 30 days and no one would find you or be concerned, but...
It really sounds like we haven't read this news article at all, but actually the fact is that it's just so bizarre that it's hard to quite get your head around.
Very little information as well on, what actually happened.
Well, I think it is normal in China for them to shut down particular elevators. It's like in our building here, they shut down one of the elevators and turn it off at night. And it's just left till the next morning. It does happen.
Oh my god.
So I think it might be a common practice to shut down certain elevator shafts during festivals or in the evenings. And what the mechanics who did it should have done is bring it to the bottom, check no one's in it, and then lock it. It sounds to me like incompetence.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that in China it's common practice for, women to be left in elevators for 30 days.
I was reading a bit of the article and it said that she lived on her own. And what also is quite depressing is since it was during Spring Festival, and Spring Festival is a time where Chinese people get together. It's essentially their Christmas. It's a very family orientated holiday. And it's quite upsetting to find out that this woman obviously had maybe no one to do that with, right? Because then they would have been worried about her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it would have been, they would have found her earlier.
And I think it's also really common in China for people to migrate from the countryside to the city and not know anyone. Like, you could live in a city and never know your neighbours. I think I've seen some of the people who live in our corridor like once or twice because people are always so busy. Maybe you don't know anyone in the town that you live in. It can be hard to meet people in a city of like 10 million. It can be really isolating if you let it. So I do understand why maybe people didn't know where she was or wonder where she was.
This story is particularly scary because, we have to use elevators every day because, we live in high-rise apartment buildings. And like Liz said, there are some foreign teachers here who are particularly skeptical about stepping in some of these elevators. They are quite sort of creaky and they seem to be badly made. Certainly the one that we had last year was all wooden inside. In fact, the one here in this very apartment building where we were recording this podcast, it seems to be like made basically like a cardboard box.
Cardboard box and a string. There's a guy below it pulling it up every day. Yeah. It highlights maybe, the health and safety practice at work here, especially with all the builders, because there was something similar that happened last year with escalators. Actually in Hubei province.
Right, we should probably mention that, yeah.
For people who didn't hear about it, I think it was pretty big in the West as well, but there was on 2 occasions, 2 people were killed by escalators when the metal grating at the top of the escalator basically just fell away.
Right.
And people got, chewed up inside it, which is horrible to think about.
But what gets me with those 2 particular news stories is the fact that they were recorded. So people were standing around watching other human beings get their legs chewed off
Right.
by escalators and just filmed it rather than helping them.
I mean, I think that's human nature generally, Dean, but like,
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
It's
Like,
particularly
there is-
close in here just
right,
to
there is-
watch things happen.
there is a culture of, of like recording and taking photos of anything and everything, so it doesn't surprise me that there was a video of that.
I mean, it's I guess, like, outside looking in, it's really easy to say, oh, I would have done this, I would have done that, but you know, those people might have been scared, and their first like automated response was just to get their phone out and start recording.
Really?
Sounds
Well,
terrible, right?
Really?
In the defense of those people, if their families want to sue the company who makes the escalator or something, it's like really good evidence. I don't know. Maybe that's what they were thinking.
That's
Maybe
the
it wasn't a
lawyer in you,
WeChat.
isn't it?
Yeah, maybe it wasn't just a WeChat moment. Maybe
Yeah.
they were doing some hardcore lawyering or whatever.
I am sceptical of
Really?
everything you have said.
So I want to try bounce away from this horrid chat of death and mutilation. There's one other big event happening this week in Beijing, the start of the 2 sessions. So it's a large committee which has women and men from all over China, from all different ethnic backgrounds, from all different villages and cities. They come and help the government assess the last 5-year plan that China was operating on, and they work together to make a new 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan basically sums up what they want to do, what their goals are in terms of economics, technology, travel, expansion in almost all sectors. So I think it's after this week or maybe next week, the new 5-year plan will be implemented.
On the 16th.
On the 16th, there we go. We're going to introduce these news articles every week. So hopefully next week there's something a little bit more lighthearted that we can talk about. Not people who are getting, disfigured. Or hopefully something nice from 2 sessions comes out and, there's a beautiful new plan that we can talk about. As teachers out here in China, we are very lucky to get 4, sometimes even 5 weeks, depends how the weeks end up. But we normally get 4 to 5 weeks of holiday, and we can use that time to travel about China or travel about the rest of Asia. So this festival is called the Spring Festival, and that's when the lunar calendar turns from one year to the next. And we also get a change in zodiac animals. So ours changed from the monkey. No, the goat.
The goat to the
The
monkey.
goat
monkey.
to the monkey, and it's been dubbed as the golden monkey this year. And they've kind of reintroduced the Monkey King, and there's a very, very popular play in Beijing Opera. And they've started redoing TV series for the Monkey King as well. So what is it like when the Spring Festival is on in China? What's the kind of atmosphere you get?
Traveling is crazy. I'm sure we mentioned this in our podcast about traveling. Because there are lots of migrant workers in China who come to the cities to work from the countryside, during Spring Festival everyone goes home to visit their families, and so getting the train anywhere is a nightmare. It's so difficult. It's so busy and just crazy. And over this Spring Festival, this Chinese New Year, there was really, really bad weather, and in Guangzhou especially, it was apparently unseasonably bad. It was really cold, and apparently like 100,000 people got stuck in the train station because they had to cancel all the trains and cancel all the flights, and so all of these people were stuck in this freezing cold like wind tunnel, because all Chinese train stations are freezing for like 24 hours. And there was also a story of a woman who was on a plane. Did you guys see this? On a plane by herself.
Yeah.
She got the whole flight to herself. She basically had a lot of money and booked this flight or something, and then she ended up being the only one on the plane.
That was because there was also problems in the Shanghai train station, so people couldn't get to Shanghai to fly out. So she ended up being the only woman, the only person on that flight.
That's
pretty rock and roll.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. I never heard
She
that.
had like a whole, like not even like a private jet to herself, like a whole chartered flight to herself.
Like we've said already, this year we were lucky enough to be out of Wuhan, our Chinese home, during Spring Festival. But last year, Ruth and I were here for quite a bit of it because we had friends who came to stay. And I can tell you now, Wuhan is nothing like what it's usually like at any other point of the year. It becomes a virtual ghost town. People, like Ruth just said, people leave for the countryside. So restaurants and shops, they all close their shutters. And it's very hard to go to like your local little small family run restaurant to get the cheap food. If you want to eat, you're going to have to go to like Macca's or, a big sort of chain restaurant or a fancy restaurant in a mall. Also, like we've said before, public transport here is very, very busy most of the time. During Spring Festival, it becomes noticeably less so. So yeah, it's a weird place to be. Places like Shanghai and Beijing, even though they are way less populated at Spring Festival, all their like restaurants and stuff like that are usually open. It's just such a touristy place and such a like largely populated place that it just couldn't shut down like that. Wuhan, though, as we've talked about before, is a second-tier city, not as important. There's not as cool stuff here, I guess. If you listen to our previous podcast, you'll know there is a lot of quite interesting stuff. It's just not as important, so that all these places need to stay open.
Yeah, but I think that will change, though. If you think that Wuhan's like a really new city, 20 years ago this was a swamp. Most Chinese people that I speak to, they talk about, like they live in Wuhan, but this isn't their hometown. Like, it's such a Chinese English phrase. It's like, where is your hometown? People always ask you that, and that's kind of what I started to ask people, especially if I like tutor them or whatever. But I think over time, what's going to happen is Wuhan is going to become these people's hometowns, so they're not going to need to go back to their hometown small village. People will start coming here because it will be their hometown as like the city grows.
I also find as well the way that Wuhan is expanding. A lot of the people I was talking to, I was like, "Oh, so where did you go for Spring Festival?" They basically went to essentially a suburb of Wuhan, so it was still kind of in Wuhan, but it was just labelled something else. So it's kind of like Greater Glasgow, I guess, back home. So eventually, Wuhan will sprawl out to all these places, and they'll just be going home to the suburbs instead of staying in the city. Okay, so before we got out to Vietnam, we decided to take the fast train down to Guangzhou. We found that the planes were a lot cheaper, and it was the only really place that you could get a direct flight to Vietnam was with Southern China Airlines. So it saved us getting on 2 flights to essentially go to Vietnam. Anyway, what do you think of Guangzhou?
I personally was very disappointed in Guangzhou. It's become a sort of running joke amongst the 4 of us that things are either like better or worse than Guangzhou, or maybe it's just a running joke with me.
No,
like I just like everything I think of, I'm like, this is better or worse than Guangzhou. It was also, I mean, we'll go into this more, but it was plagued by like the worst weather. So our 2 days there, was it 2 days? Like 2 nights and like one whole day where like we weren't able to do anything. Although I personally think that there wasn't really that much on offer to do. So
no, there's a really big tower, like is it a radio tower, a TV tower?
Yeah,
you can go up and there's a viewing platform.
The Canton Tower.
Yeah, so we were going to go up that, and we couldn't because the visibility was so poor that it would have been a waste of time. And we tried to go somewhere else, but it was raining. I don't really know. It was just really not great. And also our hostel...
We were going to go to the Opera House, wasn't it? And it was closed.
Yeah. And then the hostel that we stayed in didn't have any heating. So when we got there the first night, they had this big air conditioning unit, and we tried to put it on, and it was just blowing cold air. So the next day we went and asked at reception, and she was like, "Oh, no hot air in January.
They've ran out of hot air.
There's no hot air in Guangzhou. It was terrible."
The risk of being a dissenting opinion, I quite liked Guangzhou.
Why?
I think, a couple of reasons. One, I'm not going to hold the unseasonably bad weather against the city. 2, when we were there and we got street food one of the nights, the guy was really cute.
Oh, okay. Massive tick for Guangzhou.
Massive tick.
Yeah.
Priorities. And the third reason, I thought it was a really beautiful city to wander around.
Okay, yeah.
There was lots of really nice areas, like around the Opera House and the Canton Tower. The streets were really nice. The coffees were great. If the weather had been nice, we could have been up the tower and it would have been absolutely gorgeous.
We did have some nice food when we were there, in fairness.
And we saw that really weird, unusually laid out sports stadium.
Oh yeah, that was
the
bizarre.
cranes right in front of the stands.
Yeah,
I don't know how that worked.
Maybe I'll or one of us will throw the picture on Facebook. There is like a Olympic, or not, I don't know if it's the Olympic, but
I think it was the Asia Games.
Asia Games stadium stand. I'm not really sure what sport it was for, but there was a massive AK-47, gold AK-47 sculpture outside of it, and in the background you could see the Canton Tower. So it was like the most notable landmark from Guangzhou and the Canton Tower.
Nice, I like it. I actually Instagrammed that before we left, but I will put it on the Wuhan Weekly Instagram as well, because it's a legit photo of this sweet AK-47.
Right.
Guangzhou bling.
The only thing I liked about Guangzhou was that it had Kowloon milk, and that's milk from
Hong Kong.
And it tastes really good. It doesn't taste the same as the milk in China.
You can't get milk here, really. Not
Not milk like that. I mean, Kowloon milk still isn't perfect, but it's the best substitute for the piss water that you are served here.
It was pretty legit. Even I had it.
There was a 7-Eleven right beside us, and we cleared that sucker out of little cartons of Kowloon milk. I think that's the only thing I liked about Guangzhou.
The airport was also freezing. Do you not remember? It was just like freezing cold. There was no heating
I think it's
No hot air.
I think
it's because it was unseasonably cold.
Right, it's important.
There's no need for it because it's usually like 20 degrees.
It was like
Even though
9 degrees.
Yeah, it was unseasonable. I mean, usually it's 20 degrees in the winter. So why would they have central heating?
Right, that I think we should say for those people who have a bad sense of Chinese geography that Guangzhou is like right in the south of China near Hong Kong, and like the weather is generally mild to like hot there. And when we arrived, it was just outrageously cold.
I'm just gonna say it. I wouldn't waste your time going to Guangzhou. Just go to Hong Kong. It's so much better.
Honestly, I'd come to Wuhan before I go to Guangzhou.
Yeah, don't go.
Anyway, we went to shitty Guangzhou, and then we hightailed it out of there, and we went to Vietnam. Now, normally it's popular for travellers, I think maybe even coming from China more often than not, to start at the north and work their way down to the south.
Yeah.
The north is normally considered to be more beautiful, so you want to spend as much time up there. That's what the rumours say. I don't know.
That's what I was told beforehand, but I think as you'll come to see that we probably did it the right way around. Actually,
So instead of flying into Hanoi in the north, we actually flew into Ho Chi Minh City at the bottom. Everybody you hear about who goes to Vietnam will go to Ho Chi Minh City and will go to Hanoi. So we're probably not going to talk about that too much detail. We're going to talk about the other places that we went to, so you can get a better idea of what Vietnam's really like. But we will briefly go over them. So we were in Ho Chi Minh City for 5 days, was it? Maybe 6?
5 days?
Yeah.
Ho Chi Minh City?
Yeah.
No,
4.
we were there for like 4 days, right?
It just felt like a really long time because we had no bank cards.
Yeah, we had some money problems there, and it did make Ho Chi Minh the sort of entry into Vietnam a little bit more problematic than we'd expected.
Yeah.
So-
Not money problems caused by us.
No.
Money problems caused by ICBC, who didn't give us
Fuck you, ICBC.
who didn't give us bank cards with magnetic strips. So we arrived in Vietnam at the airport with absolutely no money on it. The only person who has a card that works is Dean, and it's just an absolute nightmare. So we spent a really long time trying to get our cards to work,
Right. But
wasted a day.
let's not bore listeners with that whole palaver.
Literally, the first day of our holiday was just a nightmare.
Right.
Like someone had just shat on us, and we're like, thanks. But it was nice weather, so I guess.
And
that's fine.
at the same time, we've just been like thrown into Ho Chi Minh City, which is unlike anywhere else I'd ever been before, because just like it was so busy, and also tourists everywhere. Like the most foreign faces I've seen in such a like small area since I was in Scotland, and yeah, the hot weather as well. I think we all like quite liked Ho Chi Minh City, right? In a way.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great.
I loved it.
Certainly, there were better things to come, but
Yeah.
it was a cool place to be.
I mean, we did all the main things. We went to the War Remnants Museum.
Right,
We,
that would be top of my list to go.
If you were in Ho Chi Minh City for a day, I would say just go there,
Right.
and then pick up some street food. We went to a couple of temples, which were beautiful, and we went to the
Reunification Palace.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to say. Yeah.
Which was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Much better than I expected it to be. It was very nice.
Okay, so after we left Ho Chi Minh City, we started traveling north, and the first location that we ended up in was this mountain town called Dalat. So does anyone want to tell me about Dalat?
Dalat was a really, really beautiful part of Vietnam. It would be this Central Highlands or Northern Highlands?
Central Highlands.
And it's up in the mountains. It wasn't too long a bus journey to get there. Although let me finish.
It was the most eventful bus journey.
Although we got a sleeper bus, and a Vietnamese sleeper bus is like being entombed alive. I had like a miniature panic attack. So naturally, my friends here were so concerned.
If you've ever seen that Ryan Reynolds movie,
Buried.
Buried, then you know exactly what it was like.
I was
or
like
Kill Bill Volume 2.
Yeah, I was clawing at windows, and it was pretty awful.
The best part, let's just paint a picture, was when Dean was so angry and his pillow kept falling down and he was so mad and then sat up and smacked his head off the ceiling and started punching the ceiling.
Why, cruel world, why?
I mean, I remember getting like a pain in my side, and I had to get out of the bed, coffin, and like stretch, stand up, and breathe. I mean, it was so awful.
I just thought the best bit was you trying to get in there, trying to get on because we were right at the back, and there was 4 beds at the back on the floor, and we were all quite close together. And watching Dean clamber into this bed and then say he's got like stomach cramp or something. I was like, my stomach. I was dying.
And there's a rack of 4 like tombs above us as well, and they were like so low down. It was like awful. It was so bad.
Just out of interest,
And
how
they
many
were-
times did you fold the green blanket they gave us on that journey?
Look, I don't. It's not unreasonable to want a nice flat pillow. I don't want lumps. I don't want fold lines. Yeah, it needs to be comfortable, especially when you're stressed out. You know, and there was nowhere to put my feet.
Mate, you don't have any feet. You're bloody not even that long.
Well, so there was nowhere to put my feet. But we got to Dalat anyway.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. Once we got there, we had a lovely hostel. It was really, really pleasant. Although it had deficiencies.
Right.
But I don't want to dwell on the negatives.
No.
We spent a sort of leisurely time drifting about. There was plenty to see. There were a big functioning Buddhist monastery up that you could get a cycle to, or you could get the what do you call those?
Cable car.
Cable cars.
Yeah, but we biked it up there.
We
It was
biked
really
it up,
lovely
yeah.
ride. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we biked it up there, and
It was right
views
beside the
were so
lake as
beautiful.
well, wasn't it? Yeah, it was
the
really
views
nice.
were so
I
beautiful.
believe the monastery was called Trucklam Pagoda.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
it. And when I was there, one of the monks in the first part of the temple we went into was explaining like the different temples in the complex were for like Tibetan Buddhism, like the Southeast Asian Buddhism and so forth.
Right.
And that was really cool. And you can book a day and a night retreat with them and do like yoga and whatever else, which is kind of cool. We didn't do that.
No.
Because I can barely touch my toes, never mind do yoga. So I didn't do that. There was really, really nice pubs and food, and the Dalat wine tastes like a watery Bordeaux, but it was a really nice kind of clarity thing. The Dalat wine was really nice.
You know, all the vegetables and fruit in Dalat are extremely fresh.
Right.
Some of the freshest fruit I've ever had.
It was it was also just, I think you should agree, it was a very welcome change of pace from where we just been in Ho Chi Minh City,
Bustling
because
city.
yeah, right, because like it was much quieter, very like we saw some tourists but not that many. Obviously we're in a hostel, it was populated by tourists, but like the rest of the town not really. And also it was much cooler. So yeah, and we just, like Dean said, we had just had a nice time sort of like wandering around and just checking the place out.
And the architecture was really, really unusual because it was originally a collection of sort of holiday villas for the French from when it was Saigon. They would retreat there in the summer. So you have a really weird mix of like French and Vietnamese architecture and like sort of 1930s style, sort of Poirot-esque constructivism with, it would have been the King's Valdez
Yeah,
Summer
the
Palace.
emperor. Was he an emperor or the king? But yeah, his summer palace was really beautiful.
The royal family.
Would that be
Yeah,
art- would
yeah,
that be-
the royal.
Would that be Art Nouveau or something?
I don't know, it just
I
kind
thought
of
it was Art Deco.
yeah,
Art
it looked
Deco,
like a
that
sort of
was
Art Deco like house. It was a cool place to go visit.
So
yeah.
there were really nice sort of just to wander around. It was small and quiet, so that was really pleasant. I had my favourite food in Vietnam there.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the beef curry / stew.
Oh yeah.
Right. Oh yeah. We should probably give a shout out to
Yeah, Bicycle Up. If you're ever in Dalat, Bicycle Up is a very, very cool place. Very hipster, very out of the way as well. It's kind of tucked away in the corner, and it doesn't have that big a menu, to be honest. It had chicken curry, it had a beef stew, and I think it had a couple other pieces. But if you go there, get the beef stew or get the chicken curry.
Yeah.
It's one of the best things I've ever
yeah,
had.
and they also just did great like Vietnamese coffee. I'll probably mention it again, but Vietnamese coffee is legit. It's so delicious. And yeah, I think Dalat is generally not a place that backpackers go that often. I know it's sort of like it's on the sort of backpacker trail, but I think it's bypassed if like for time constraints. You really shouldn't. You should go.
I think the main reason is the next two places that you go are very much the idealistic backpacker place.
Right.
Sun, beach, booze.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, the mountains now, sack that, I'm going to go to the beach instead. Which is fine, but if you want to see something different, do go to it. We also went to the Crazy House, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It was insane. It's basically a house that I think it was the Emperor's daughter was an art student
Yeah.
or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
And she was just like, I want to build something crazy.
Pretentious alert, but if you know the Sagrada Familia Cathedral in Barcelona that was designed by Gaudi, it's kind of similar to that in its design. Not as impressive as that, though.
It's kind of like going into Alice in Wonderland. I mean, you're already on acid, right? When you go into Alice in Wonderland, but then taking acid again. It was very obscure. We also went to probably the diviest dive bar we have ever been to in our lives. When we first walked up to it, it had this like brown tinted window. I thought it was closed, but it was just so you couldn't see all the seedy things that were happening inside. So we went in and there was this guy. His English was fine, actually. And he was nattering away to us. And he had a pool table and it was all covered up. And we're like, oh, can we play pool? He was like, yeah. We unsheath the pool table and there is more cigarette burns on this thing than a hooker, man. Oh my god. Can I say that?
No.
So we unsheath this thing and it's probably the worst pool table I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
All the balls are from a different set of like snooker cues.
And also, it's so dark that when I'm playing loose, I feel like I can barely see him across the table.
But the guy was cool.
Yeah, he was playing some great tunes as well, like Vietnam War era tunes, and it was a cool atmosphere.
And he pulled out Connect 4, a sort of miniature Connect 4 for those of us who weren't playing pool.
Yeah. He was really nice.
Cool.
He also made another guy a cocktail and gave me the rest of it. You know, like
out of the shaker.
Out of the shaker. I don't think the guy who paid for the cocktail was too pleased. He was nice. It's the oldest bar in Dalat, which is why we went. We sought it out because it was we read in the guidebook that it was the oldest bar there, and it was really, really cool. Just so different from anywhere else. I think there's a backpacker area of Ho Chi Minh City, which is kind of where our hostel was, and it was fine, but we would walk down this one street and everybody's kind of offering you like shots and cheap booze, and I don't know, I feel like I'm just so tired. I want to go home at 10:30. I don't want to go to happy hour for 7 hours and get really, really drunk.
Right.
So it was really nice to go somewhere that was a lot more laid back.
Yeah, the only other bar that we really saw in Dalat when we were looking at the guidebook was like, Jim's crazy 24-hour bar. Come and get 8 shots in your eyes. I was like, no, thank you. I'll do that later.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saigon Night, shout outs to that. Again, if you're in Dalat, I know it's a very small place in the world, but please go to Saigon Night. You'll know exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, and night is spelled Nite.
Edgy.
Yeah.
So after we finished our trek in the mountains, we decided to hit the beaches. So what was the first beach we went to?
So we went to a beach town, and I'm probably going to get the pronunciation wrong, but it's spelled Muine and Muine. Yes. So we went to Muine, and it's a very small town, basically like a 10-kilometer stretch of road. And on one side of the road you have hotels and restaurants. On the other side of the road you have restaurants and bars. And then on the other side of that, like behind those restaurants and bars, you have beautiful golden beaches and the greenest, turquoisiest isn't a word. The most turquoise sea like I've ever seen. And also just the views from the beachfront were amazing. You know, like it's a very popular place for kite surfers because you get some quite high winds, which makes sunbathing on the beach there a little bit difficult if you don't like to be stung by specks of sand while you sleep.
Although we all managed to get sunburned, so that clearly was not an issue for us. Except for Dean, who didn't go in the sun.
Yeah.
I've got a legit photo of Dean. He's white as a sheet because he's just covered himself in suntan lotion. I will put that up on the Wuhan Weekly Instagram as well because it's hilarious.
So Muine is the first proper beach stop as you go north from Ho Chi Minh City. Obviously, there are places to the south of Ho Chi Minh City worth visiting, but this was our first chance for a while because there aren't really beaches in central China to kick back, relax, read our books, listen to some tunes, and get our tan on the beach. Yeah, it was a really nice place. And other things that I found really cool about it were the food was great there. Lots of amazing seafood, as you would expect. We also had some amazing Mexican food there. Mm-hmm. Bizarrely, Muine has sort of been taken over by Russians. It was weird, I think, to go to a Vietnamese city or it's not really a city, is it? It's a small town. To go to a Vietnamese town and to read menus from restaurants and them to only be in Russian or English and not Vietnamese is really weird. But I'm not really sure. Do you have any ideas why that's the case?
I think it's something to do with banking, right? I think they had a lot of offshore accounts or offshore banks in Moina and another beach resort, Nha Trang.
Yeah.
I think it was very popular for Russian investment during the war, maybe, or before the war.
Someone also told me that a lot of the hotels that are built there are owned by Russians, so there's probably just really good like package deals and stuff, the same way that a lot of British people go to the Costa del Sol, a lot of Russian people go to Muine. I guess it's not that far. I was kind of thinking, why would they go to Vietnam? But then if you're from central Russia, it's probably
not
anywhere. It's probably not that much further to go east than it is to go west.
Right, sure.
Mhm.
I was just going to say, like, nothing against Russian people or anything like that. It was just extremely jarring to see all this Russian lettering on shop fronts and to hear most of the people that you walk by speaking Russian. There are actually very few Vietnamese people there. I guess that could be seen as, like, negative for the town of Mui, but it was kind of cool.
So you've spent your couple hours on the beach. What is there to do?
So
Moine.
Moine.
Moi. Moi.
So I think that if we'd gone to Mui and all you could do there was eat, drink, and go to the beach, we might be like, it was cool to go to the beach, but, it wasn't my favourite place in Vietnam. The thing that really, like, raised the bar was the red and white sand dunes there. It was really cool to go from the town with the beach and the sea and to just drive, like, 30 minutes outside the town and to be just faced with seemingly, like, miles of desert and to get to go on some quad bikes and roll around the dunes. And then they took us to the red sand dunes, which are a little bit closer to the city for the sunset, which was really, really beautiful. And I'd never seen anything quite like those sand dunes. I've been to sand dunes before, but they were really beautiful.
Ruth, you really, really, really enjoyed the live music in Moine.
Oh my god, we went to a terrible bar where there was a terrible singer and she was singing really cliche karaoke songs, and I was able to guess which songs she was going to be singing next because obviously it was Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You, and then her friend came on and sang Billy Joel, which is terrible.
That wasn't the best night out we went on our Vietnamese holiday.
No.
There was Backstreet Boys or something thrown in as well, wasn't
It was
there?
just awful.
Yeah.
There's also a guy rapping Rihanna. It was just, no.
Yeah. With no concept of tune or melody.
That was annoying as well because that was the one night we decided to go because someone said, there's an open mic night.
Right.
And it's supposed to be quite good tonight.
They said it was soul, and then we had Billy Joel being performed.
And there was a Vietnamese man playing Smells Like Teen Spirit on his keyboard.
Grumbling away into the mic.
He
Not
didn't
knowing
even know
any words.
He didn't know any of the words, right?
And then the next night when we walked past, there was someone and the music actually sounded quite legit. And we're like, damn, we should have gone tonight instead, but we already had other plans.
Right.
Anyway, so we went from Dalat in the mountains down to the beach in Moine, and then we went up the coast.
Yep, the eastern
Up
coast.
the coast to Hoi An. So what did you guys think of Hoi An?
We bypassed, on the way to Hoi An, we should probably mention we went to Nha Trang, did we?
Yep.
Yeah.
That was only for one night.
Right,
though,
and
was
then
it?
the next big stop was Hoi An, and what did you think about that, Ruth?
I loved Hoi An. I thought it was maybe one of the best places I've ever been. It's really beautiful, really picturesque. I think it's kind of what people think of when they think of Southeast Asia without tons of arseholes. Sorry.
Sorry, British and American people.
it is mostly British people as well.
Scandinavians.
I don't know, maybe take that out, that was really harsh.
Remember Axel?
Yeah. We saw him everywhere. Anyway, Hoi An is kind of what you would expect from Southeast Asia if you weren't on if you were not 18 or 19 and going away to get really hammered or whatever.
Right.
And all of the streets had lanterns and everything. It was really beautiful. It was kind of like a fishing town. No, that was Mui.
It was a UNESCO World Heritage
Yeah,
Site.
there was so many beautiful buildings, all painted so many beautiful colours. Everything was just so beautiful and calm and peaceful. It was such a nice change of pace from basically everywhere that we'd been. We were there for Lunar New Year, so like obviously Chinese New Year is the end of the lunar calendar, but a lot of Asian countries use the lunar calendar as well. And in Vietnam, they call their Lunar New Year Tet, T-E-T. And so we were there for that. We got to see the fireworks. It was really, really beautiful. You can also get clothes made there. So Dean and I got some clothes tailored, which is pretty great. And we ate some wonderful food there. It's a little bit more... I don't know what the word is. It's a little bit more expensive, yeah.
I mean, you can eat at the sort of regular, inexpensive places, and they're still really great in Hoi An, but there is such a wide variety of restaurants to choose from that are a little bit more expensive, that are really, really great, that it's worth just spending a little bit more to do that.
We had some really amazing food there. Like, at all times of the day. There was a really nice place to go for breakfast and for dinner, and it was just great. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it's probably my favourite part. There was even a really nice bookshop where I got books and things.
Right.
And yeah, there was always something to do, and it's just so picturesque. You can just wander about, calm.
Right, it's really hard to describe it
Yeah.
because, it's not a big city, it's really small, so it doesn't have, it's not bustling or anything like that. It's just so it's just unlike anywhere else in the world I've ever been, just because it's so quiet and Asian and
Sleepy.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
sleepy is a really good way to describe
Right,
it.
yeah.
It's still like, it was busy with tourists and there were a lot of people there. It wasn't super quiet. I'm not saying it's some sort of out of the way place that people don't go to visit, because that's definitely not true, but it really was so different from a lot of the other places that we went to. It was really nice.
We can't complain about the clothes we got made there too.
No, or the amount of wine that we managed to consume while we were there.
And that really good Vietnamese wine. Vietnam has the best wine I've tasted in Asia.
Yeah, so after we went to Hoi An, we went up to Hanoi, got the worst night bus that we took when we were there, and arrived at like 4 a.m. and it was just awful. I sound like I had a really shit holiday when I actually had a really good time. I think I'm just in a bad mood.
That, to be fair to you, that bus was like breaking the sound barrier. I mean, that was flying.
I think it is important to say that while Vietnam's a really, really great country and there's so much amazing stuff to see and do there, the bus journeys are crippling. Like, especially if you're trying to make the most of your time there, you don't want to get buses during the day, so you go for the night buses, and these tend to 14-hour night buses. They're quite uncomfortable. They're really bright, so it's hard to sleep. They're going really fast, and the roads are really bumpy.
They always seem to be stopping and starting to pick up stragglers on the side of the road.
Yeah,
Right.
Who is at the side of the road at 2 a.m. with their children?
Right, exactly.
And in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think that if backpacking through Vietnam has its negatives at all, it's that part of it. And if you can afford to take flights everywhere, that's great. But the buses are so cheap and cheerful. Sorry, cheap and not very cheerful, that it's really tempting for backpackers and people coming from China looking to save a little bit of money on their transport to just take those buses.
The way the buses work in Vietnam, in terms of cost, it's negligible.
Right.
It's a half decent meal out, right?
Right.
So are you really going to, spend a plane, which was maybe like a week worth of all your food and travel, or just, bear it for 10 hours and just do it? You normally just go for the shit night bus,
Right.
but it does really sometimes cripple the first 2 days of your entry into a new city.
Right. I think it is, before we go on to talk about Hanoi and what we saw just outside of Hanoi, which was, I think we're going to all agree, is one of the most amazing things we've seen in the whole world, that whilst Vietnam is really popular and you should go there, it's so cool, coming from China where we live and work, a place that isn't really visited by backpackers or tourists or whatever, because I think China has a sort of aura of being kind of daunting, kind of a difficult place to navigate, not really knowing very much about it, when in fact actually China is a much easier place to get around than a place like Vietnam. And if you're ever going to go on holiday to Asia, you should take that sort of thing into account, because it is important.
So we arrived in Hanoi. Should we talk briefly about what we did in Hanoi?
I mean, I would just say that Hanoi is just so overwhelmingly cool and full of stuff to do that you'd be mad not to go to Hanoi, for God's sake. It's the capital city and all that. So.
Right. So we went to Ho Chi Minh's
Mausoleum.
Yeah. That makes it 2 embalmed communist leaders checked off of Ruth and I's list.
Yeah. It was weird. It was a lot less intense than when we went to see Chairman Mao. There were a lot less people crying and generally just being a bit over the top. And the queuing was much better organised. But it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Really kind of so odd. It's just not a thing that we do in the UK. But it was
revere our former leaders that.
Yeah, and it's just a really interesting thing to go and see.
The mausoleum on the outside was very, very large, very almost cold, quite communist.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But the way that, it was very beautiful in Hanoi. You had all this green and they had a massive, beautiful lawn outside. So it was very beautiful in a way to see this industrial communist building, but have all this beauty around you.
Right.
So it was quite a contrast. I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was really interesting because obviously the Chairman Mao mausoleum is on Tiananmen Square. It's made out of marble. It's really imposing. And although the Ho Chi Minh one is really, really big and imposing in its own way, it was a lot more simple.
Yeah, much more modest.
I thought it was, I think maybe says a lot about the people who are inside of there and how they governed their country.
Right.
It was an interesting way to look at how Chinese people view Chairman Mao and how Vietnamese people view Ho Chi Minh, and maybe the way that they choose to reflect their admiration.
There was one other major place that we went to, and it was a small temple that was in the middle of one of the bigger lakes in the French Quarter.
The lake is where the Old Quarter meets the French Quarter, and I believe it's called Ho Kiem Lake. There's a small temple there, like you said, but it's the most visited temple in Vietnam. The story about the king who drove the Chinese out of Vietnam, he has a story about this magical sword that he had and about how he used it to achieve that. And he was sitting by the lake one day and this massive turtle came out of the water and snatched it from him and took it to the bottom of the lake for protection. And the legend goes that turtle is the protector of this magic sword, and his ancestors, the ancestors of the turtle, have continued to protect it down the years. And so in the pagoda they have a stuffed giant turtle, and there is also one in the water apparently. Apparently that is an actual thing.
So you were saying that a couple of years ago they actually dragged the turtle out of the lake because it was sick or something?
Right, so kudos to Lonely Planet for this story, but we had a Lonely Planet guidebook to help us out in Vietnam, and it was in there, they said when they wrote the guidebook that they were actually there when the doctors pulled the turtle out of the lake to give it some medical treatment because I guess it's old and sick.
Right. Hanoi, beautiful. You need to go there. Good food.
Oh my god, such good food.
Stuffed communist leaders. Stuffed turtles. What more could you want from a city? Also, the Women's Museum was really great. I've never been to a city where they have a museum dedicated to women. And Tony and I also went to the Ethnology Museum, which was amazing. I read the most horrific review on TripAdvisor about an Italian man, who basically was annoyed that they didn't have people from the different ethnic groups dressed up in the boxes at the museum. So if you're thinking that the Ethnology Museum is like that...
I think a direct quote from said Italian man was, "and selling their wares." What? What do you want, mate?
I think he was expecting the Vietnamese government to go into the mountains and round up the ethnic minorities, put them in...
Come on, sell your stuff, come on.
It's funny as well, he obviously didn't read many of the signs because a lot of them are kind of self-sufficient and don't sell anywhere.
Right.
So... But, very, very interesting.
Some of the coolest museums in Asia were in Vietnam.
One of the main reasons to go to Hanoi, of course, is to, locate yourself to two main places. One of them is Sapa, which is up in the mountains. I think they have a lot of rice paddies up there. And the other one where we went is Ha Long Bay. Now, this is a very popular destination in Vietnam. I think it's number 1 in the book, or maybe number 2. I think the big cave is number 1.
No, man. It must be number... Well, Ha Long Bay must be number 1. Yeah, man.
It's the number 1 place to go to.
What does Ha Long Bay mean in English?
Ha Long Bay?
Descending Dragon.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so... Did I
steal your thunder, man?
Yeah, man.
Well,
you came firing in there.
Yeah.
So, long in Vietnamese and in Chinese means dragon.
Right.
And then Ha is descending. We got a tour guide out there, didn't we? So we got the bus from Hanoi in the morning and we went out and we had this guy called Jackie and he was hilarious. He really did make our adventure that much better. We went out in the morning and we arrived in Ha Long Bay, the city, in the early afternoon. Jumped on the boat. We got this smallish boat that had...
What is the actual term for it?
A junk
boat. A junk boat. Was it a junk boat?
Yeah.
So we got on this junk boat and there was maybe 18 of us, maybe? It was quite a small party.
Right,
it?
I don't even know if it was that many. Yeah.
There was, people from all over the place, so it was really good. And we had some guys who were younger than us, and then we had a couple of people who were a lot older than us. So we had quite a good mix. There's normally 3 packages you can take when you go out to Ha Long Bay. There's the YOLO booze cruise, which costs £5 or something like that.
Yeah.
And you go out and you get a tank top or something at the end of it. I don't know. There's the one that we went to, and it's a little bit more, not to shove smoke up our own arses, but it's a little bit more classy.
Right.
It's not so drink orientated. And then you can get the super deluxe version where they go to, I think, a different part of the bay and you have a 5-star room in a boat or whatever. But no, Ha Long Bay was beautiful. We had some lunch as they drove us out. And for people who don't know what it is, it's basically just about a bunch of limestone islands.
I think there's 1,900 in total.
Yeah, there's fucking heaps of them.
Yeah.
And since it's limestone, it's really rich in nutrients, so there's beautiful trees and plants and all that kind of stuff on each of the islands.
And some monkeys, I think?
There's some monkeys, is there?
Some gibbons.
And there's also a lot of caves there, which were beautiful. So when we went out to Ha Long Bay, we managed to go to a lovely cave.
Surprising cave.
Surprising, all right.
And it was very surprising. There was 3 main chambers, and it's the biggest cave in Ha Long Bay.
Right.
And the first chamber was okay. It was not too big. Second chamber, a little bit bigger. Third chamber was it was 5 or 6 football fields.
Right.
It was massive inside of it. And it was beautiful, and they had lit it all up with all these lights. and they had stories about it, and there was a penis stone, which was interesting.
I thought it was officially a pointing finger, but it looked like a phallic symbol. Yeah.
It's what? It's a what do you call the ones?
So titties, stalactites are the ones that go down, and then stalagmites are the ones that go up.
So it was a penis-shaped stalagmite, basically, right?
Stalagmite that was coming out of rock.
Right.
Yeah. It was an elevated stalagmite pointing up to the ceiling, which looked like it had a pair of balls.
It was meant to be a pointing finger, but it looked like a massive penis.
It's just funny because like that would never have become a thing were it not for the fact that the cave was discovered by the French and is now like daily populated by Americans and British people.
Idiots, basically.
Well, what I find most surprising about the surprise cave was the fact that
Nice.
one of the Austrian girls on our trip was like, "This is fake. This is not real. Do you think this is real?" And I was like, "Yeah."
She was like, "Have you ever been to a cave like this? Because I'm pretty sure caves aren't like this." And I was like, "No, caves are like this."
This is a cave. Last time I checked, we were in a cave, and this is a cave. Because she was surprised because the top of the ceiling, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, it looked like someone had carved it out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But that was just because the cave had been underwater as of 100 years.
Right.
Like more than that, like thousands of years.
Yeah.
No, like it just recently got discovered.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it had been underwater, and all the waves coming in and out just eroded the rock.
Well, I presume this... What national... Well, it doesn't matter what nationality, but I presume she's
That's
never heard of...
a sly jib at Croatians as well.
I assume
Austrians.
Did they teach about, like, erosion?
In Austria.
Yeah?
I assume so.
I assume
Well,
so.
Come on.
She wasn't
How can
stupid. She was bilingual. Like, she was pretty smart,
Right.
but then she was like, this cave's not real.
She just doesn't know of how water impacts on rocks.
I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast.
She won't.
Let's send it her. Anyway, so we saw the cave. It was beautiful. We got a lot of photos of all the islands, and it was great. The boat ride out was amazing.
Right.
Only way I can describe it is Jurassic Park-esque when they're flying into the island. We also went kayaking. Which was great. I had Dean on the front of my boat just complaining the whole way. Lewis, are you even doing anything?
He wasn't
doing
doing
anything. And then I was
anything.
apparently rocking the boat.
He was
and that's what
rocking
you need to do
He was rocking
to
the
move
boat,
forward.
and he wasn't paddling properly, because you're all meant to paddle in the same direction and keep it going, but he was just sitting there pretending to steer. You know, doing nothing.
Coming from Mr. Universe over here, he showed me how to kayak. So we did the kayaking, and then we had some dinner on the boat and a couple of drinks, which was great.
We were really lucky with the weather as well. Apparently it was, like, it's unusual that it was as sunny as it was for us when we were there, which was really great.
Watch the stars, very nice.
Yeah,
Beautiful and clear.
Again, the sunset. Like, I'm not really that big on sunsets. Non-romantic that I am. But to see the sun go down behind that backdrop was just really... Like, it was... honestly, there are places in Vietnam, and Halong Bay is one of them, that just, like, words are not capable of describing. I know that's cliche, but, like, you really need to just go or, you know, look at pictures, because Halong Bay is, like, nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, breathtaking.
And it's weird because so many people I know have been to Vietnam and kind of said it was amazing, and I know that it's really, really popular with tourists and people coming from Europe and America. I was really worried that it was going to be disappointing, that it was going to be kind of maybe a bit overhyped or just a bit over touristed. I don't think that's a verb. And
over-traveled, I guess.
Over-traveled, yeah. I don't know. I thought maybe people would just be kind of weary with foreigners as well.
Yeah.
I kind of found the opposite to be true, which was really, really great. And I'm so pleased that I feel that way.
The nicest people I think I've ever met, most hospitable, genuinely do anything they can to make your experience that a little bit better,
including extending happy hour.
But
yeah, like, just leading on from that, I think that especially with regards to Halong Bay, you read everywhere, it's the top UNESCO World Heritage Site to go to, or something like crazy plaudits that are like heaped on top of it, and you think, oh, it can't be that good, and all these like crazy backpackers go on booze cruise out to there, and you're like, oh, like, it can't be that good if that's what you can do. No, it's that good. Yeah. Like, it's really amazing.
If you do go, or if you decide you want to go, just I would suggest spending $20 more or whatever it was that we had to spend.
Wasn't that much.
It was essentially one night in a hostel or whatever. Just spend that little bit more money to get a nicer cabin, and I think you would enjoy it a lot more. I think what would be best to do is we'd take a couple of snapshots from our adventures and put it on Facebook, just so that you can see the places that we're talking about. So after Halong Bay, we went back to Hanoi for a couple of nights, which was fine. And then we decided to go back to China via the bus. This was the main reason why we flew down to Ho Chi Minh and started in the south and went up to the north, because it was very easy for us to get the bus across the border to Nanning. How did we find that trip?
Yeah, it was weird. Like the border crossing, I think, is the most like eventful part of it. You know, China making their presence known
excessively.
Yeah, I guess without like saying too much about it negatively.
Right.
So we took the bus from Hanoi to the Vietnamese border, and that was all fine. And then we got in golf buggies, and then we were driven in a golf buggy to the border of Vietnam and China, and we had to go through like Vietnamese immigration, and then we had to get another golf cart and then get driven up to the Chinese immigration, which was much grander and a bit more stressful and intimidating. And then once we'd done that, we just got on the bus, and it was all pretty straightforward and pretty easy.
We had a bit of a nightmare on the bus when we were in China, because me and Ruth were at a station getting some food. Everybody had gotten off to go to the toilet, and we were eating some food, and Tony comes like running over, shouting at us like, the bus is leaving. I was like, no, it's not. I look outside, the bus is legit out of the car park, like on the road, going away. So we had like these pots of noodles and we were chasing after it, but it's just like, you realised you were back in China as soon as that had happened, right?
Yeah. And then Lewis kicked mine as he was getting on the bus, went all over me.
But on purpose.
But I was so angry because we had to wait an hour and a half in a car park in China at the border to wait for enough people to get on the bus so we could leave. But none of these people extended the same courtesy to me when I wanted to go and eat something.
Yeah.
No, they left. Yeah. I was swearing so much when we got back on the bus.
Do you remember when we finally crossed the border and we got through all of the immigration stuff and we got onto the Chinese side and we got out to wait for the bus and a guy came up to us and was like, taxi to Nanning. Yeah. It takes like 5 hours to get to Nanning from there. This crazy chancer who's trying to get us to get in a taxi. Yeah. Bizarre.
Insanity.
Nanning had a very nice hostel. I think the best hostel we've been in the whole holiday, as a matter of fact.
We had legit
3 hours in Nanning.
Right.
One thing about Nanning, the subway at the train station had no bread. This is just another complaint.
Right,
it
did.
Not the subway as in the transport system. The subway as in the American sandwich chain.
Oh,
it was the apocalypse now. Well,
nice.
They had no bread. So bizarre.
I tweeted at them and they replied. They were like, "Where is this subway, Ruth? We're very concerned." I was like, "Oh, it's in China."
Yeah, the guy was like, "We have no bread," and you were like, "No, you just haven't made any bread, have you? You've just been sitting here, just like, there's no bread. We've got all these ingredients to make the bread, but we still have no bread."
But we were like saying it in Chinese at him as well. He was like, "No, sold out," and we were like yelling like "no bread" at him just to make sure that there was just to make sure there was no confusion. But no, anyway,
outrageous. But yeah, that was on that depressing subway note. that was our trips around Vietnam. So personally, I thought Vietnam was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Very relaxed, change of pace whenever you want it. If you want to slow down a bit, you can go to some of the places like Dalat, Moi Ne. If you want to speed up a bit, go to the bustling cities and the Trang. Ho Chi Minh, there's always like something crazy to do there. The people are, nicest people I've ever met. The food is delicious.
I'm happy with that. I think I agree.
Yeah,
I agree totally
entirely.
With
you can they've got UNESCO World Heritage sites just
everywhere.
It's such an turn a corner and there's like this amazing piece of human heritage and history, just stumbling over you.
Right.
It's really impressive.
I also think it made me really aware of, I think a lot of the times, well, especially when I was growing up and going to school and my geographical knowledge was kind of expanding, the only thing I ever really knew about Vietnam was the war. And I felt, we went to the War Remnants Museum and I feel like we really kind of like learned about it and appreciated it. But I felt like it kind of teaches everybody, I'm going to speak for the whole tourist population of Vietnam, in that it teaches everyone that there's so much more to one country than this like horrible like chapter in their history. And I think my dad, who was there a few years ago, he felt the same way as well. So I thought it was really interesting to go there and feel that way too.
All right, that'll do it for this week. Next week, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. We're going to be doing something interesting and fun, no doubt, though. But if you guys have any suggestions or anything in particular you want us to discuss, tweet at us or send us an email and we will have a look at it. That in mind, where can they get us, Tony?
You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Wuhan Weekly in the search bar and give us a like.
Or you can find us on Twitter at Wuhan Weekly Pod.
You can also find us on Instagram at Wuhan Weekly Pod. haven't really been able to post anything. Having some trouble getting on the internet at the moment, but that'll be back up soon.
And if you have any questions, suggestions, all that kind of stuff, you can email us at wuhanweeklypod@gmail.com. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.